Hello everybody and welcome to the Ketogenic Diet online class. So we're going to be going through a series of modules, and with every module we'll have some activities to do, but there'll also be a video with every module, and when you go through it we hope that you get a certain packet of information to help you make sure you are on the right path with the ketogenic diet. So this is our introductory module. We're just going to go through what the ketogenic diet is and how you can use it therapeutically. So one thing I always like to remind people of is that we are all individuals, and at the genetics and at our internal physiology we are all different. Just like when you look around at everybody walking around outside, you will see that everybody is slightly different. Heights, slightly different hair colors. There's what we call individual variability. And this also occurs within ourselves. So our ability to digest food, certain foods, and our ability to metabolize certain nutrients like sugar, all underlie our internal environment, and it's very different from person to person. So I always remind this because it's very, very important to individualize treatment, always individualize treatment. And one thing that may work for one person may not work for another person. So I like to think of genes as something that has a function in the body. So if you look at these two examples of two different genes, if we were to use those as kind of examples of genes, you would see that one would be they're both bridges. So the function is to transport something across, like a car. And you can see both do their function. They're able to transport a car across. But you can see the difference between the two is that under lots of stress, one is going to, say this guy, it's going to falter after there's a certain amount of stress that is being applied. And this guy, he's going to be able to handle a lot of different traffic, which is stress, and that one's going to hold up. So if you were thinking of a health condition like diabetes or weight loss, then you could think of this person, for example, both would be able to handle normal amounts of sugar or low amounts of sugar, but when there's a certain amount that's being added, this one would fail first. So what's really important to understand is just because you may be this person and have those underlying genes that may confer some sort of a weakness, it does not necessarily mean you will end up with the health condition. You may not have diabetes, or you may not be overweight. It's really the stress, so it's the environment, and which is really liberating when you hear this, is that you are in control of the environment and we are in control of the environment. So we could use the environment and manipulate the environment to create one that we can thrive in, and prevent kind of long-term progression of these illnesses. So that's what's really exciting. But this individualism occurs through our ability to digest nutrients. So for example, our ability to digest fats is going to be different from one person to the other. So we can we have to take this into account as we develop the perfect ketogenic diet program for you. So what's the importance of the ketogenic diet? And I would say one of the biggest importance is it's a low sugar diet. It's very, very low carbohydrate diet. And sugar is a very big problem these days, and it is leads to a lot of different problems when in excess. So leads to diabetes, and diabetes is a risk factor for a ton of chronic illnesses. Insulin. So at the very root of a lot of major chronic diseases is this thing called insulin resistance. And we see this occur many, many years before the development of diabetes, and also seems to be associated with other health problems, potentially things like cardiovascular disease, and maybe even cancers. So insulin remains high in the body. It can remain high for many years before you see a blood sugar problem, because when you're having problems with metabolizing or breaking down the blood sugar, or when blood sugar is at very high levels, then the insulin has to be hypersecreted, because the job of insulin is to get blood that is in your tissues to outside your tissues. Or sorry, that is in your blood to inside the tissues. So it helps regulate the blood sugar, because we really can only have a very small amount of sugar in our blood. Take a teaspoon or a tablespoon of sugar, and that is the amount of sugar that we actively have in our blood. All the entire blood in our body is just in that one, I believe it's a teaspoon of sugar. And if you think about it, when you eat a can of pop or drink a can of pop, or you eat some cereal, which is often a couple of teaspoons of sugar, your body goes into overdrive to metabolize that, and it first has to hypersecrete insulin to get it out of the bloodstream, because the bloodstream must remain at a very low and narrow range of sugar content, otherwise you will have problems. So we get those into the tissues, and in the tissues they may be stored as fat for use if we're in excess. They also may be stored in the liver, and they may be stored in the muscles to be used during activity. So too much insulin is a very big problem, and it's a ticking time bomb for many people. Some early symptoms: you could experience difficulties with metabolizing sugar. So you're going to start noticing fatigue after eating sugar, or just but let's just say most people are asymptomatic until it becomes a problem. You may have some fatigue problems until it leads to blood sugar problems, and it's often picked up, unfortunately, when the blood sugar is elevated on a routine blood test. But many people are likely insulin resistant or have high levels of insulin before the blood sugar increases. So the ketogenic diet is a great example of how we can use the diet to push some sort of a physiological target and meet some goals. So it is an energy diet. It's a very energy promoting diet. So the average person is running on glucose, and this fuels our energy power plants within our cells. We call these energy power plants mitochondria, and they are present within all of our cells of our tissues of the body, and they're going to be more abundant in areas of the body that have more energetic demand. So they're going to be more abundant in the brain, in the heart, and the kidneys, for example. And it makes sense that we have to have more energy power plants in those tissues, because the heart really can't take a break. It continues to beat and will never stop beating. And the brain also has to continue to monitor vital functions and do a lot, so it never rests. And the number one fuel source, what we call the universal fuel source for these tissues and all our tissues to fuel the mitochondria, is sugar. So something called glucose. So we break down all our macronutrients, our food particles, and we break them all down into small little bits, and we absorb them as sugar, or we have the ability to make sugar from other nutrients in our body, like proteins, amino acids. And while you're having lots of sugar in your diet, our body is using glucose as its main energy resource. Now, we have this wonderful ability to use another source of energy. So as we run out of glucose, we've developed a second energy source. So our bodies have the ability to run out of glucose and really survive, and we call this ketosis. So we flick a switch when we run out of our energy from sugar. Either we're not eating sugar or we're not eating in general, and we just use up all our sugar reserves in our body. We then enter into ketosis. And this serves to keep us healthy and vibrant in times when we have famine. Because many, many years ago, even just 50 or 100 years ago, we were a little bit more reliant on fluctuating our nutrients. So it's coming from different food sources. But many, many, many years ago, back in archaeological time, we really did go through periods of a feast and famine. So we had periods where we had lots of food and plenty, and then we had lots of periods where we had to seek out food and the foods that we had to seek out were often animal-based foods, and the foods that we had in times of plenty were often vegetables and fruits and carbohydrates, and those were usually in a certain season. So I always like to give the example of the car. Imagine if your car ran out of fuel and then you had this amazing backup fuel that was more energy efficient than the standard fuel. That would be pretty amazing if that could happen. And actually we're starting to see that with the hybrid cars and biodiesel cars. but our bodies have this ability to do that, which is pretty amazing. So there's the metabolic switch. We're going from burning sugar as our main energy source to burning fats as our main energy source, because fats are really the precursors to ketones. And this is just an example of ketone metabolism. So with glucose metabolism, so you can see you take sugar up, you grind it down, you put it in on a conveyor belt, and you make energy. And then you use that energy to actually make power. And we use up that energy through doing work, exercise, for example, thinking, having our heart beat, those kind of things. And as you can see, this all occurs in what we call the mitochondria right here, and we have a secondary source, that is the ketones, and the ketone generation. And we make them by taking fats from things like olive oil, saturated fats, and we take them to the liver, and then we produce these molecules called ketones. And there's three major ketones called acetone, acetoacetate, and beta hydroxybutyrate. Now we also have the ability to use our stored reserves that occur in our fat cells or fat tissues, and when we're fasting and don't have any food intake, we then will use that, and we could live for quite a long time just on our fat reserves, and we're really more susceptible to dehydration over the short period of time than we are from food, because of this ability to take fats from our tissue and break them down into molecules called ketones that then are again put on a conveyor belt and used to make our energy currency in our cells, and then fuel our power plant or pay the workers at our power plant to make energy that can be used in thinking and having our heart beat, those types of things. So there are many reported health benefits of the ketogenic diet. Some of the most common things that we find clinically are enhanced mental performance, elevated mood, lower anxiety, better blood sugar regulation, and better metabolic syndrome support for people with abnormal blood sugar levels, more energy. We see weight loss, and we even have anti-aging processes. So for this module, this is what I would like to stop at. So it was just to introduce you